I'm really excited about today's show because I recorded a mindfulness in action about it. And it came up because I was thinking about decisions. I had a silly injury. Most of my injuries happened from doing silly things. And I was at my son's birthday party. He was turning 6, and it was at the Ninja Gym. And they have these like one-armed ring swings you can do. So it's like monkey bars, but you're doing it on rings that are suspended from the ceiling. And I was so excited that I could actually do it, and I made it to the last ring, and my hand didn't quite grab it all the way, and I couldn't grip it and let go, and I fell, or I flew through the air, really, and I hit, a hard platform, and I bruised, like, I don't even know how many ribs, maybe 6 or 7 ribs. And so that meant that I couldn't really do much training. Like I had to stop weightlifting, I had to stop running, I had to stop mountain biking. And true to form, I always focus on the things that I can do. I've had lots of injuries over the years, and there's always something that you can do within reason. Well, not always. Like there's times where you need complete rest, but a lot of times there are little things that you can do. I was still able to ride the trainer inside, so that was really really nice to be able to do that. I was really grateful, but I couldn't lift and I couldn't run. So this past week, I've been kind of getting back into it. I did like a test run and a test gym, experience, and I still had to hold off for another week. And so I was out on my mountain bike because I could finally ride again outside, and I felt more relaxed. And I asked myself why, and it made me think about decisions. So a lot of times we have decision fatigue. There are so many different things that we can be doing. And I thought about this even more broadly, like when I was pregnant or whenever it's like the rainy season or the winter, whenever you have infinite options of things that you can be doing, it's harder to feel at ease with what you chose. And I'll get into this even more, but I was out on my mountain bike and I didn't have this nagging thought of I should be running, I should be on my I should be at the gym. And then I remember like I mountain bike through both of my pregnancies. There was no nagging feeling of I should be going harder, I should feel better than this. And even in the winter season here up in Canada, especially more whenever I lived in Kelowna where it was really snowy all winter and there was no option to ride outside. It's like, should I ride outside or should I ride inside? And then you question your decisions. So just this is just kind of a first pass at prompting you to think about whenever you have every decision at your disposal, do you say I should more often or I shouldn't more often? Does reducing your number of decisions help? The second piece was I started thinking even more about this, and I thought, well, what are the different contexts where I say I should do something? And are there broader categorizations of times that we say I should? And can I look at those categorizations and figure out for myself and maybe share with you guys, which I'm doing today, how we can stop shoulding all over ourselves? And I talk about this in the Mindfulness in Action podcast about the shoulds. And I give a brief overview of this, but I wanted to do a deep dive into what the shoulds are, different contexts in which they arise, and how we can help ourselves not do it quite as intensely because we all do it. The primary emotion that is associated with should is guilt. You feel guilt that because you should be doing something. I should be further along. I should be able to handle this. I should be able to do more. I should be better than this. There's all those types of shoulds. And shame can also be a part of that. So the difference between guilt and shame is guilt is I did a bad thing versus shame is I am bad. Those are two different things. I did my master's in applied positive psychology a couple years ago, and now I teach in the master's program. And one of the things that we teach in our class is about thinking traps. And thinking traps are a distorted way of thinking that leads into a downward spiral and a lack of perspective, like a narrowed perspective. And shoulds are a thinking trap. They're one of the most insidious thinking traps out there. And the should thinking trap is one that so many high performers, athletes, people who are ambitious, or even people who are trying to, change their habits and have healthier habits fall into constantly. All of us are shoulding all over ourselves. And I first heard shooting all over ourselves in Sex and the City. I think Carrie Bradshaw said that, and I remember laughing. This is probably like in the early 2000s. The one that I say to myself all the time is, I should be better than this, or I should be able to do more. And those two are so painful because there are so many different reasons why we do that. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But I just wanted to normalize that all of us think like that. And even people who are doing lots of different things think I should be better than this. I should be able to do more. Or it might be based on habits that you're trying to adopt. I gave the example in the mindfulness in action. I should be meditating more. Or my husband and I were talking about how we don't do enough mobility work in our training. I should be doing more mobility. I've heard people say I should be eating healthier. I should be going to bed earlier. I should see my friends more. Like those are other types of shoulds. So, what is a should anyway? And it's weird. Like, whenever you start thinking about a word too often, or you start saying the word too many times, it starts looking really weird and sounding really weird to you. The shoulds is actually a type of cognitive distortion in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is one type of practice. And it was coined by Albert Ellis and later picked up by Aaron Beck. And these are two of the founding researchers in the field of cognitive behavioral therapy. So if you've been shoulding on yourself, know that psychologists have been studying this for decades and that you're not alone and that you're human because everybody does it. I don't think dogs do it. I was just wondering about my dog. Like, does he have these types of thoughts? In our class this year, our lead instructor, she said something really funny that I had never heard before about what Albert Ellis said. He has a brilliantly blunt term for the shoulds, and he calls it masturbation. And when our lead instructor, Judy, said that, all everyone was like, whoa. And masturbation is the tendency to make preferences and desires and escalate them into absolute demands. So I must do this. I should do this. I ought to do this. I have to do this. And his argument was that applying this language of rigid obligation to the flexible, messy reality of human life creates unnecessary suffering. Sometimes types of suffering can be helpful, they are part of growth, but this type of suffering is unnecessary. It doesn't help you to feel guilt and shame all the time. Beck independently named these should statements as a core cognitive distortion. So, this is a well established territory, both in real life and in the research. And the question is, what do we actually do with this? What do we actually do whenever we're saying, I should be better than this? I should be able to do more. I should go to bed earlier. And so during that mindfulness in action I recorded, I started thinking more about different categories, like different ways or contexts in which we say I should. And I came up with three. So one of the categories is something you should do, but you haven't quite committed to. So you heard me give multiple examples, and those were habit based. Or another one is like, I should do my taxes. You either don't actually want to do it, or you lack the systems, processes, or concrete goals to make it happen. I should meditate. I should call my mom more. These live on the list indefinitely and generate guilt every time you think about them, which is doing nothing useful to yourself. And actually, guilt can make you sabotage yourself even further. So, whenever you say, I should do something that you haven't fully committed to, it's usually because number one, like you understand why. You understand why this is important, why you need to do it. It's the difference between knowing and doing, but you haven't gotten to the what and the how yet. So this falls under kind of the goal setting realm. It also falls under a commitment realm. When we make a commitment, we're doing it, we're committed to it. And then there's I don't even want to call it a commitment, but the things that we say that we should do, or the things we know we should do, but we just never do it, or we do it much, much later. And all that procrastination causes so much pain and suffering. So that's an outward facing should. So noticing whenever it's about that, and you can ask yourself, what systems, processes, or goals do I need? So the goals are the what, and the systems and processes are the how of it to ensure that this becomes a commitment. This is where a lot of the stuff that you read and hear about habit change can really come into play. Many of you have read Atomic Habits by James Clear. He came on the podcast to talk about atomic habits. I've had Katie Milkman on the podcast to talk about habit change. She's a researcher in the field. I've talked about habit change a lot as a coach. So that's one category. It's kind of like a habit change or just something that you don't want to do, a kind of a procrastination thing that you are saying I should do. And you're wasting so much mental energy I'm listening to myself say this because I always procrastinate my taxes. So it just costs so much mental energy to just say I should, but to not actually do it. So the question I would ask you is what needs to happen? What needs to be set up to ensure accountability, a clear goal, and a proper process so that you can do it? Another example in this category, I'll go back to the mobility example I was talking to with my husband, is he was saying like his personality, and I do this too, is well, if I don't have a lot of time to do it, it's just not worth doing. So for mobility, I said to him, well, how can you habit stack it? Coming from the habit change literature, how can you habit stack it with something that you're already doing, where maybe you just do 5 minutes of it? So, like, if you go to the gym, how can you add mobility in so that it's just part of what you're already doing? Another thing that I want to bring up is that there's so many different things that we hear we should be optimizing. I'm using the word should in here. We hear that we should be optimizing everything. We should have this laundry list of self-care things we should be doing, and you should be meditating every day. You should be journaling. It's like all these things get completely exhausting. And I actually recorded a podcast about this at one point of if your self-care is stressing you out, and I'll have to find that somewhere, because we start saying we should be doing all of these habits things for our health, but there's too many things on that list. And instead of optimizing, we're just making a list that we'll never be able to get to. And not every single thing should be done all the time. And not every single thing works for every single person. So if you catch yourself feeling bad because you're saying you should be doing all these different self care things, pick one off the list and then just leave the rest and see how that one small thing makes a difference instead of trying to make this massive list of things that you should be doing. So that was category one, something you should do but haven't committed to. Category two is lack of acceptance with where you're at. I started thinking about the opposite of this. So whenever I talked about pregnancy, I've talked about injury. Whenever you're injured or sick or pregnant, the way that you do things just has to change. It doesn't mean you can't do it at all, but the way that you do it has to change. So you actually give yourself a bit of grace and a bit of flexibility to change the way that you do it. And that's because hopefully you've accepted where you're at. With some injuries, it takes a very long time to accept where you're at. It doesn't always get there quickly. Sometimes you're sick and you feel like you should be training. I mean, I see this all the time. I feel it in myself. I see it, with my husband. Is like you're sick, and then you say I should be training, and then you go out and train when you shouldn't be training, and then you get sicker or you feel bad, and you made yourself go out there because of the shoulds when really you should have just accepted. Play on words. You should have accepted that you're sick and that things need to slow down a little bit, or that you need to just reorient your goals. Another example is you have to take care of kids. And you also feel like you should be working, or you want to just be more present with your kids, but there's this nagging voice saying you should be working, you should be more productive. And the you should be working one fits under this lack of acceptance. Is in reality, we're all human. We all have a certain amount of time in our day, and it's okay if you can't be working every single second. Except, like, for me, this has been a huge acceptance piece of I have young children. I am the default parent, the primary caregiver. That means I have less hours to attend to my work and my training than I used to. So if I say to myself, I should be doing more, that is not accepting where I'm at. And it's where I'm at is I have limited time, like even less than before. So why would I should all over myself, telling myself I should be doing more when I'm already doing the best with what I have? A lot of us are in seasons of constraints and are running expectations designed completely for different circumstances. Another example of lack of acceptance where you're at is when you compare yourself to a previous version of yourself. And category two and three, you'll hear there's a lot of overlap, but I still wanted to separate them out a little bit. So, say I was training, 10 to 15 plus hours per week. It was my primary focus, and the rest of the things were second or third on my list. And then maybe you don't have kids, but maybe you had kids and then you had to change your priorities. Or maybe you just got a different job and now you don't have as much time to dedicate to training. And you can mix around the example, but I'm just giving an easy one. But you still expect yourself to be able to do what you did before, even though your circumstances have changed. Is that really fair to yourself to say, I should be, hitting PRs, or I should be training 10 to 15 hours a week, or I should be, going to the gym 3 days a week, whatever it is, when your life has changed dramatically? Is that fair to say that to yourself? I like the idea of diminishing social comparison, of not doing that as often, but we also have to be careful because we can compare ourselves to past versions of ourselves that generate the shoulds. I should be better than this is a key example whenever you're thinking about a past version of yourself because it's setting you up for unrealistic expectations, which is category 3. If your inputs are different and the things that you do on a daily basis are different, then you shouldn't be like you were before because you've actually changed how you do things. So that leads me to category 3, the shoulds that are about high standards that are just way too high or expectations. This is where perfectionism comes in. There's even a form of imposterism called the superhuman that I'll talk about included in this piece of the shoulds. That's I should be better than this. And that's the one that I struggle with the most. Or actually, probably I should be doing more as well, but I should be better than this is just always, 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 always in my head. And I'm always working with it on a daily basis. I should be able to handle more. I should be better than this. It's because the standard is vague. We set our own standards, or maybe we feel like society is demanding standards. So, in the perfectionism language, self-oriented perfectionists set incredibly high standards for themselves, and socially prescribed perfectionists feel like they have to meet the demands of society. And maybe it's a bit of both, but it's just unmeetable. And this is why, and this is a broader part of my work in the book I'm writing, is why our achievements never feel like they're enough because even if we achieved our goal, it should somehow still be better. I should be better than this. And it's never going to be up to snuff no matter how hard you work. So noticing when you say I should be better than this, noticing the context of when that comes up, noticing is it due to a lack of patience? Is it due to the fact that you're not accepting that your life has changed and you can't do exactly what you did before, that you can't be as committed to the thing, so therefore your expectations might be out of whack. And I also just want to name a couple other things that they're kind of aligned with these categories, but they're just these inherited shoulds. So, like standards, they're standards that you never chose to adopt, but that come from family, culture, your sport, from social media, or from professional norms. And these sort of fall into that socially prescribed perfectionism, these expectations, or just from comparison, what you feel around you, what you see around you, that may or may not even be true. Again, like when you're on social media or even just when you're comparing yourself, you compare yourself to the best version of somebody else and you assign all this meaning and all of this stuff to what you think somebody else is doing when really it's not an accurate depiction of what's actually happening. Or maybe, your family has done things differently, or where you live, the people around you are doing things differently, but it's not actually reality for you. The standard isn't necessarily self generated. So that means that how you address the shoulds here could be a bit different. So you're not just adjusting the standard, you're also figuring out where that standard comes from and if it's even valid for you. And last, another type of should is backward looking shoulds where I should have started earlier. I've been saying that with weightlifting. I should have started earlier. I should have caught that. Like if you make a mistake. And these are aimed at the past and you can't change the past. They sit at the intersection of self blame and just have a distinct flavor that is just not very helpful. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about these traps and then I'm going to tell you how to get out of them. So to recap what I've said is I started off talking about how I started thinking about the shoulds in the context of decisions because when I have less decisions, there's less shoulds because there's less rumination around what I should have done or what I shouldn't have done. And then I thought more broadly about the context of the shoulds. They fit into kind of three broad categories, outward facing and inward facing. And within that is the category one of I should be doing something, I should be committed to doing something and not doing it. And then the other two are lack of acceptance of where you're at and then having too high standards or expectations for something. And then I talked about a little bit about inherited shoulds and backward looking shoulds. The shoulds come directly from thinking traps. So, thinking traps are part of cognitive behavioral therapy, and they're automatic thoughts that pop in our minds that get us stuck in a loop. We get hooked and we see things in a way that aren't actually reality. It's distorted thinking that leads to a negative spiral of more negative emotions and also a limited perspective. There's a bunch of different types of thinking traps, so I'm not going to talk about every single one because there's too many. But if this is interesting to you, I encourage you to go on Google and just Google it. I teach these in my mental performance coaching, so I'll just give you a couple. So I've already talked about the shoulds. should or must, which are explicit or implicit rules, how we or others should be behaving, and it threatens our sense of competence. It makes us feel guilty. There's also personalizing, where we think that everything is our fault. And definitely fall into that. When things are not your fault, you blame yourself. So you're internalizing all problems that are not your fault. Catastrophizing, which is another one that I do all the time. Or if you're an athlete, maybe you got like a flat tire in a race and now you think the race is over. Or your husband has a headache, therefore he has a brain tumor. Like those types of things or you don't hear from your kid, so they're lost, or like whatever. We all have our own different ways of over focusing and blowing negative events out of proportion. And also, there's a bit of research in athletes that says catastrophizing is negatively correlated to mental toughness. So, the more you catastrophize, the worse your mental toughness. Another is overgeneralizing. So, sweeping conclusions that we make, like I didn't get chosen for the team because the coach doesn't like me. Like that's not actually true. We take one data point and then we make it a much bigger thing that doesn't actually mean that that's what the story truly is. So one piece of evidence is leading to this wide spreading conclusion. A couple more is one is labeling, where you say something like, I should be more organized. And then you tell yourself, I'm a disorganized person. So it becomes about who you are as a person when it's not actually true. And I'll just share one more and then I'll go into these nested ones. And there's just so many, it's just like hard to do that, to talk about it all in a podcast. And the last one I'll talk about is fortune telling. And it means that you think you should have been able to prepare for every possible outcome. And you're just not able to do that. You can't tell what the future is going to be. So how does this align with those shoulds that I talked about earlier, those three broader categories? Well, whenever we say things like I should be further along, we're getting stuck in a couple of different traps. This all or nothing thinking and a trap of social comparison. Maybe you're comparing to others. I should have known better. This is like that backwards thinking trap. And that's like the personalization one. And this hindsight bias that we should have been able to tell the future back whenever we were making our decision. I should be able to handle this, or I should want to do this. Both of those fall into emotional reasoning. So, what that means is if you feel a certain way, so I feel guilty, therefore I must have failed at a real obligation. So, just start paying attention whenever you say you should to see if you're actually stuck in some of these thinking traps. And again, you can Google them, or if it's easier, just go back to the three that I talked about at the very beginning about something that you should have done, that you should have committed to. So, an outward facing thing, or an inward facing one where it's about lack of acceptance where you're at, or that your standards are too high for your expectations. Something that's worth mentioning is that the shoulds are important to think about because it's about the belief underneath that should. So, is it a neurotic obligation that's about, you being a bad person? If you don't do this, then you're a bad person, or that you are failing in some way, or is it something that's more values aligned? Because sometimes that can happen with these habit based ones. So here's an example. I should meditate can be this neurotic obligation, where it's about like proving yourself as a person. If it's been on your list for several years, if the standard for it is really vague, and maybe the reason why you want to do it is because you saw some wellness influencer telling you that you should meditate, but you never actually examine it. And whenever you skip it, you just start beating yourself up. That's an example of using the shoulds to like tell yourself a story about how you're bad or how you should feel guilty about something. However, there is a time and a place for I should be better than this. This is not about skirting responsibility. So I think it's important to talk about that. So if you're saying to yourself, I should be better than this, going back and asking, is this based on a vague standard or a standard from somebody else? Or is it a moving target that you'll never meet? Or is I should be better than this from a values aligned aspiration attached to a specific gap that you're working on, a craft that you're working on, and falling short? And it's still not very helpful to say I should be better than this, but the shoulds can be helpful whenever they are actually about something concrete and are not leading to a thinking trap where you're stuck in this negative downward spiral. I wanted to quickly just talk about the difference between these two, a values based aspiration and a neurotic obligation. So, the emotional tone really matters. So, if you're feeling shame, dread, beating yourself up, if you're feeling guilty, that's more of a neurotic obligation. If you feel disappointment or curiosity or motivation, that's actually like a values aligned aspiration. If you are saying I should and you feel like procrastinating, you're avoiding it, you're ruminating, that's more in this neurotic obligation category. And I'll put a link to this chart in the show notes. I'll give you kind of a quick flyby to differentiate between whether the shoulds are based on some neurotic obligation or a values based aspiration. So, whenever it's something that is a neurotic obligation, which is part of these thinking traps and everything that I've been talking about, the emotional experience is shame, dread, beating yourself up, guilt, and you are procrastinating, you're avoiding, you're ruminating about it, you feel very rigid about it, there's no exceptions allowed, and you haven't really examined the origin of why you're doing this, and it's often fear based, and the self talk that comes with it is I'm failing, I'm lazy, what's wrong with me, I'm bad. That's the underlying talk versus a values based aspiration. And again, I just wanted to make this point because sometimes shoulds are helpful. The feeling with that is more like a feeling of disappointment, or curiosity or even motivation. And whenever you feel that way, you're recommitting, you're planning, you're adjusting, you're adapting in real time to circumstances, you're being flexible. You are consciously choosing what you want that's aligned with one of your values. And you are saying, I care about this and I want to get back to it. And that is more of an expansive feeling. Disappointment isn't really, but how you respond to this can be an expansive feeling versus this neurotic obligation feeling of should is a contracted feeling. So the practical question to ask yourself whenever you are noticing the shoulds, I should be better than this, I should be doing more, I should do my taxes, is if I don't do this, what story am I telling myself about myself? If the story is about your worth or your identity or what kind of person you are, that's in this neurotic obligation category that's not helpful, where the shoulds are creating guilt and shame and beating yourself up, regardless of how noble the content of that should sounds. And if the story is simply, I miss something that matters to me and I want to course correct, and I feel curious and motivated, that's more of a values aligned aspiration. So knowing what your shoulds are, where they come from, and these broader categories that I've been talking about, and even how these can turn into thinking traps and how there can be lots of things at play is really important. The should is never really about the behavior. It's about what you've decided the behavior means about who you are as a person. And that's where the real work happens. So, how do we actually stop shitting all over ourselves? I spent a lot of time talking about what the shoulds are, where they come from. Hopefully, you're not bored out of your mind hearing about all of these. So, how do you work with this? So, there's a couple different things I'm going to tell you about. So, this one is about just noticing the thoughts and then questioning the thoughts. This is very much in the cognitive realm. So, ask yourself, says who? Like, who says that I should be doing X, Y, Z? And a lot of shoulds don't even survive that question. If you can't trace a should back to a value that you consciously choose, you're probably carrying someone else's rules about what you should be doing. Two is identifying the emotional signature of it, I've talked about. So, shame, beating yourself up, feeling guilty. That's the neurotic obligation piece. And then, if you're feeling motivated or curious or even disappointed, then that's maybe more values aligned that you want to analyze a bit further. Next, what story am I telling myself? Because what we want to do here is we want to broaden our perspective as much as possible because it's like looking through a toilet paper roll or like a wrapping paper tube. You can't really see the full picture. So, what is the story that I'm telling myself? And that can help you understand if it's about your worth or your identity and help you separate that it's not just about this behavior, it's about something deeper and I'm condemning myself. And then being able to name the thinking trap. So the shoulds is its own thinking trap, but like even what's underneath that. And then try to do stuff to generate perspective. I highly recommend Ethan Cross's book Chatter. He's actually been a podcast guest, and we've talked about that book on this podcast. So, some ways to get out of the shoulds is what we want to do is generate a wider perspective so that we could see the full picture, so that we don't get stuck without any perspective. So, number one, imagine the situation in the future. Think about what you would say if you were in the future to yourself and with a broader perspective and more wisdom. What would you say about this so you can treat yourself with more compassion and kindness? Another thing that you can do is use credible self-talk. So self-talk that's based on past experiences that have actually happened, so that you can create distance. And that works with the shoulds, is like, I should be better than this. And you can say to yourself, okay, like, when in the past have I been in a similar situation and what did I do to get out of it? Another example is creating some diffusion, and this comes directly from acceptance and commitment therapy, where you say to yourself, I'm having the thought that I should be better than this. And then noticing the process of that thought, and it can help you get unstuck. So I'm having the thought that I should be doing more. And that helps you, again, separate yourself from the thing that's happening. And the last thing is about disputation. So this is like a classic thing about changing your thoughts. So something bad happens, and then you have these beliefs about it, and then there's consequences of those beliefs, and then you have to question if that's actually true and if it's helpful or if it's not helpful. So if your thoughts are helping or harming. So I'm going to use the example, I should be better than this. That's more of a belief or a thought. So say that you do something and it just doesn't turn out the way that you hoped, or it doesn't meet your very high expectations. That's the setback or the adversity that happened. The belief that comes up is I should be better than this, which is not a realistic thought in a lot of cases. And then the consequence of thinking I should be better than this is you start beating yourself up. Maybe you stop trying as hard. Maybe your confidence takes a nosedive. Maybe you start disliking people that are better than you at the thing that you're doing. And that turns into this really dark downward spiral that is not going to help you. And you're going to stop trying as hard, and you're just going to feel worse and worse and worse about yourself. Or go back to the beginning, is something doesn't meet your expectations. You say, I should be better than this. You ask a question, you use your curiosity. Well, what makes me think I should be better than this? What is this based on? And I've already talked about that. Or what else could be true here? So that you can start broadening your perspective. And then if you want to use this category A, this I should be doing X, this is whenever we should be having more concrete planning around what we're trying to do. So not having this vague should that has no pathway, but creating a pathway for yourself. If you're saying like, I should be better than this. Well, maybe you should be better than this. This is the counter argument I made earlier. So if you're saying that and you truly believe that you should be better than this, well, what are you going to do about it? How can you create a pathway, a plan, something that is very concrete so that you can work at getting better at this? So instead of saying I should be better than this, you end up saying I'm working on this. I'm getting better. I'm committed to this. And then that helps you move forward from it. And if it's something that you're saying I should be doing, but you don't actually want to do it, just say, I don't want to do it. I feel like I should be doing it for whatever the reason. Am I willing to do the work? And if the answer is no, then just let it go, because obviously you don't want to do it. You don't want to commit to it. Or maybe you just can't commit to it right now. So that's a way of letting that go. So to wrap this up, every single one of these things that I've been talking about is about noticing what you're thinking about, noticing when you're saying I should, noticing the context in which that arises, and then trying to understand kind of the thinking traps and the origin underneath to say, is this some sort of weird neurotic obligation where it's about my self-worth and my identity and it's actually not helpful? Or is this something where maybe I do need to kind of double down and work at it, this values-based aspiration? And then redirecting your attention from what you did or didn't do to what this is doing for you, using curiosity of what you're actually getting from this, and then broadening your perspective with all of these different strategies that I gave you so that you can decide, is this a valid should, or is it based on something I haven't committed to, that my expectations are too high, that I haven't accepted myself, or that I am getting caught in some other type of thinking trap that isn't realistic. Whenever you look at it this way and you look at the pathways that you're going to move forward, or even the pathways through which you're not going to keep shooting all over yourself, that gives you volition. It helps you believe that you're able to take action on these things and to get better. And that gives you hope. So the should is just kind of like a blinking light in front of you. The belief underneath it is what you're telling yourself. And then whenever you practice this, you realize that you have a lot more power over the story than you think. And the more you practice it, the more you're able to meet yourself with compassion, with a broadened perspective, and with kindness, so that you don't get stuck in these downward spirals. I hope that that was helpful for you. That was a deeper dive than even I planned on doing, which is often what happens in these solo episodes. And I hope that you enjoy the mindfulness in action, which is a very shortened version of this with a mindfulness practice to help you start recognizing when you're saying I should. I'm so grateful that you are here. I'm so grateful to my team at Palm Tree Pod for making this show happen. And as always, I'm with you on this journey of personal growth, adventure, and our mission to be better every day. We'll see you right back here next week.